Before James Gunn began working for the Marvel and DC universe, and getting into a spot of bother over his old tweets, he was a small-time director filming grungy, violent, and just plain bizarre films and shows. One of these films, Super, a story about an average dude turning into a superhero, was released in 2010, but overshadowed by the equally brilliant Kick-Ass. Super, although filmed on a small budget, is a movie that should be watched by more. It is a darkly comedic, gory, weird, and entertaining film with a surprisingly powerful ending. Frank Darbo is a fry cook whose entire life is highlighted by two fond memories: marrying his wife Sarah and pointing a police officer in the direction of a purse snatcher. Sarah, a recovering drug addict, leaves Frank for Jacques, a strip club owner who gets her hooked back on drugs. Frank goes to the police, thinking that they can help get Sarah back and arrest Jacques. Detective Faulkner informs Frank that nothing can be done due to lack of evidence. While suffering from depression, Frank receives a divine vision from the Holy Avenger, a cringy yet hilarious Christian comic book hero, believing that he has been chosen for something incredible. Frank visits the local comic book store, looking for Holy Avenger comics, where he meets Libby, the store clerk. She casually mentions why no one has ever become a superhero. Frank realizes his calling. Frank embraces the identity of the Crimson Bolt. Armed with a pipe wrench, he battles various crimes from purse snatching to drug dealing to child molestation to butting in line. The Crimson Bolt becomes a sensation. The media views him as a psychotic vigilante, while the public sees him as a guardian. Libby asks Frank if he is the Crimson Bolt, something he denies. Frank attempts to rescue Sarah, during which he sees Jacques' drug operation. He is recognized and shot by Jacques' thugs. Detective Faulkner realizes Frank is the Crimson Bolt from a drawing in a newspaper. He goes to Frank's house to arrest him, only to be shot on accident by Jacques' pursuing thugs. Frank seeks help from Libby, who convinces him to take her on as his sidekick. Bolty turns out to be crazier than the Crimson Bolt, almost killing a guy for keying a car. Frank lets Libby go, but takes her back when she saves him from some of Jacques' goons. Libby quickly becomes enamored with Frank, who rejects her advances. Realizing the danger they are in, Frank and Libby prepare an arsenal to defend themselves from Jacques and his crew. During the night, Libby sexually assaults Frank, something she claims as sexomnia. When Frank vomits, he gets a vision of Sarah out of the chunks of puke. The duo gather their weapons and suit up, ready to rescue Sarah. They kill multiple guards, only to be shot themselves. Frank is saved by his bulletproof vest, while Bolty is shot in the head. Enraged, Frank brutally kills the remaining thugs and stabs Jacques to death. He takes Sarah home. She stays with him for a few months out of a sense of obligation for saving her life, but eventually leaves him again. Sarah gets clean, using her experience to help others. Sarah remarries and has 4 children. Frank buys a bunny for companionship, fondly looking at the drawings of his time he spent with Libby, Sarah's children's drawings, who call him Uncle Frank, and his experiences. The film ends with tears of happiness running down his cheeks. The guerrilla-style filmmaking that James Gunn and the cast operated by during the production of Super matches the grimy, cheap, low-budget, blue-collar life of Frank Darbo and the Crimson Bolt. Super truly is an original and brilliant depiction of what really happens when an average person becomes a superhero. Some have cited the similarity to Kick-Ass, and while both films have superheroes without powers and are darkly comedic action films, both are completely different movies. Movies that have average people becoming superheroes start similarly. Normal people being pulled into a new world due to various circumstances, but quickly veer into the fantastical. Intricate backstories, intimidating alter egos, vengeful archenemies, fancy suits, crazy fights in extravagant locations, and stylistic art populate the superhero genre. Super takes all of these ideas and flips them on their head. Simple things like the animation that look like something a child would draw, and the setting, some unknown town that does not appear to have anything fancy in it at all, are a stark contrast to the highly detailed and masterfully illustrated graphic novels and exotic, exciting, and dangerous locations of the Marvel and DC comics. The entire film seems to be shot in this gray tone, perfectly illustrating Frank's inescapably miserable life. Frank does not have an interesting backstory. Throughout his life he is bullied and stepped on. Instead of standing up for himself, picking up hobbies, and engaging in any sort of betterment, he remains painfully unremarkable. As mentioned before, he only has 2 fond memories: his marriage and pointing an officer in the direction of a criminal. While these memories show Frank as a loving husband with faith in the justice system, that is all he is. Not only does he lose his wife, but he loses faith in the justice system when the detective reveals that he cannot do anything to bring his wife back or arrest Jacques. Frank is void of his fond memories. As a response, he becomes a superhero. Frank does not receive any sort of power. He is not enhanced, he is not a genius, he is not rich, he is not muscular, he has no hand-to-hand combat training, and he does not even seem adept with a gun. He truly is an average man turning into a superhero. When you look at Frank's suit, you cannot help but laugh. Roughly sewn patches and stitching clearly show the result of a homemade suit. Even his pipe wrench, although effective, is completely ridiculous, and his catchphrase is hilariously bad. There is nothing intimidating about the Crimson Bolt. The media's sensationalization of his persona is complete hilarity compared to reality. Small things like the detective realizing Frank is the Crimson Bolt by only looking at a drawing makes fun of alter egos and shows how ridiculous they are. The fights and scuffles, minus the final battle, are goofy and ridiculous, no doubt. Despite his can-do attitude, Frank has no clue what he is doing, and it shows. Finally, Frank does not have a true enemy. While he hates Jacques, Jacques thinks Frank and his alter ego are a complete joke, even hilarious. Even after Frank has eliminated his entire gang, Jacques does not see Frank as a threat or an enemy, just a nuisance. There is something cathartic about Frank's brand of justice, particularly in the butting in line scene. Everyone has dealt with an inconsiderate person, someone who cuts in line or in traffic, a person looking at their phone in a grocery store while holding up an entire line or aisle, a loud and obnoxious individual, volunteering another person's help, or swiping left or right when somebody shows you a picture. There are a few unwritten rules of society that you are supposed to follow, and I have no doubt that at some point each one of us was reluctant to call out that person for their lack of basic human courtesy. I find comfort in knowing that justice was served to that inconsiderate line cutter, and I personally believe that more people should receive a sharp blow from a pipe wrench every time they break these unspoken rules. And if one does not know the unspoken rules, then that person should be eliminated from humanity altogether. I am particularly impressed with the end of the film. I know that most hero movies end with the guy getting his girl back and living the stereotypical happily ever after together. The more information the audience receives about Sarah and Frank, the more we realize that this marriage was doomed from the get-go. Sarah is a recovering drug addict trying to find some shred of happiness. The pair finds comfort in each other's misery. While helpful at first, a failed plan in the long run. Frank cannot fix Sarah's issues, and Sarah cannot fix Frank's issues. Frank finds fulfillment in his life when he finally takes the reins and does something with himself. He is motivated to change the world for the better and to bring justice. Despite his extreme methods, there is something wonderful about seeing a downtrodden man finally stand up for himself. Sarah, who finally goes back to college and helps recovering addicts, gets clean and is able to start a new life. A very inspiring story that shows the strength of human will and commitment. The sweet thing about the two, despite their separation, is that they are able to appreciate one another. Frank has finally allowed himself to let go of Sarah, a difficult and right thing to do. Despite the low budget and unglamorized filming style, Super never fails to entertain. I have watched this film multiple times. I still laugh at the jokes and enjoy it just like the first time I saw it. Rainn Wilson looks like he's having the time of his life playing the Crimson Bolt. Just watch the clip where he battles crime by beating up drug dealers, purse snatchers, and child molesters. I would be very interested in watching a sequel to this film. I'm curious to see what he would have done with a happy life. Maybe become a first responder. Or come up with a security system. Maybe even become a lawyer. Elliot Page, formerly Ellen Page, just like Wilson, rocks her role as Libby. The two have fantastic chemistry together, and Page has some of the most offensively funny lines in the entire film. Kevin Bacon, a veteran actor, knows exactly what he is doing in every scene and is so much fun to watch as the sleazy Jacques. His complete contempt for Frank and who he is as a man is evident from the first scene to his last. Even Nathan Fillion, despite his limited role, is hilariously cringy and memorable as the Holy Avenger. I cannot imagine another actor playing Frank, Libby, Jacques, or the Holy Avenger. But the most important aspect of this film, and the reason that it is so rewatchable, is the fact that you can feel the love of filmmaking in every scene of this picture. I'll take a small cheap indie movie made with heart over an expensive cookie-cutter blockbuster any day. Again, props to James Gunn for writing and directing this savagely entertaining and hilarious black comedy superhero film. Super is a film that I watch every year, and I hope to see more of these kinds of original pictures from him and others. Thank you for watching.